Ever wonder why the world works the way it does? Why some things that feel like they should be super competitive just aren't? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on a system, a playbook designed 150 years ago that pretty much runs your life. And it all starts with a simple question you've probably asked yourself at the petrol pump.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You'll drive past an HP, an Indian Oil, a Reliance station, and the prices are almost identical, down to the last paisa. In what's supposed to be a free market, where is the competition? What you get is the illusion of choice, but without any of the actual benefits, like a price war that might actually save you some money.
Or how about this one? Remember back in 2016 when Jio launched? Free calls, free data. It felt incredible, right? Like a gift from the heavens. But come on, in the world of business, nothing is ever truly free. That wasn't a gift for you. It was a weapon. A very, very expensive weapon designed to wipe every other competitor off the map.
So what you're seeing in these examples, it isn't just random market stuff. It's not competition. And it is definitely not a coincidence. It's a calculated, brutally efficient system, a playbook written a century and a half ago by one man. And that man's name was John D. Rockefeller. Now, you've probably heard the name, famous old-timey billionaire, but his real legacy, the thing that truly matters today, it's not his money. It's the method he perfected, the very system that still shapes our entire economy. Just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, adjusted for today's money, Rockefeller was worth over $400 billion. At one point, the guy controlled 2% of the entire U.S. economy. But again, the money, that's the boring part. What's absolutely fascinating is how he did it. To really get his method, you kind of have to get the man himself. On one hand, his father was a literal con artist, a snake oil salesman who sold fake cancer cures and taught his son how to manipulate people. On the other hand, his mother was a deeply religious woman who gave him this unshakable moral certainty. You put those two together, you get a businessman who was both completely ruthless and yet genuinely believed he was doing God's work. A very, very dangerous combination. So, what was this revolutionary playbook? How do you own everything? Well, it really just boils down to two brilliant, world-changing strategies. Let's break them down.
Okay, let's imagine you sell tea. Normally, you'd buy your tea leaves from a farmer, your cups from a factory, you'd rent a shop, a lot of different people to pay. But what if you owned the whole shebang? What if you owned the tea plantation, the factory that processes it, the shop that sells it, and even the factory that makes the cups? Boom. You've just cut out every single middleman. All their profit? It's your profit now. This has a name. It's called vertical integration. And Rockefeller was the absolute master. He didn't just refine oil. Oh no. He bought the forests to get the wood. Then he built his own factories to make the barrels. Then he bought his own wagons to transport it all. All of a sudden, his cost to make a gallon of kerosene was a tiny fraction of his competitors. He could sell cheaper than anyone and still make a killing.
But here's the thing, just being the most efficient guy in the room wasn't enough. Back in 1870, his company, Standard Oil, only had about 4% of the market. And John D. Rockefeller didn't want a slice of the pie. He wanted the entire bakery. And that, my friends, led to phase 2 of his plan.
He called it our plan. History remembers it as the Cleveland Massacre. He went to his 25 competitors in the city, one by one, with a very simple and very brutal offer. Sell your company to me at a fair price, or I will use my cost advantage to drive you into bankruptcy. And then I'll buy your company for pennies on the dollar.
And the result? It was absolutely staggering. In just a few months, he went from a small player to controlling 90% of all the oil refining in the city. This strategy of buying or burying your competition is called horizontal integration, and that became his blueprint. First, make a fair offer. Then, for anyone who refuses, destroy them. For consumers, of course, this meant the end of choice, and eventually, the end of good prices.
Okay, so I know what you're thinking. That's a cool history lesson, but it was 150 years ago. What's that got to do with me?
Well, what's really wild is how this exact playbook is being used step for step by the biggest companies in the world today. Let's just fast forward 100 years to India. Look at the parallels between Rockefeller and Dhirubhai Ambani. Ambani starts with textiles. Then he thinks, hey, why am I buying yarn when I can make it myself with petrochemicals? Then, wait, why buy petrochemicals when I can refine my own oil? You see where this is going, right? Step by step, he vertically integrated the entire supply chain. It's the exact same playbook.
And what about horizontal integration? The Cleveland Massacre? Well, let's go back to Jio's free data.
In 2016, India had more than 10 different telecom companies you could choose from. After Jio came in and started a massive price war, by 2020, the market was down to just 3 major players. Everybody else was forced to either merge or just go out of business. It was the Cleveland Massacre Indian edition.
And this isn't just an Indian thing, this is global. Get this, at its absolute peak, Standard Oil controlled 90% of U.S. oil refining, and the government declared it an illegal monopoly. Today, Google controls 92% of the global search market, which kind of begs the question, right? Why was one an illegal monopoly, and the other is just business as usual?
Well, the answer lies in another one of Rockefeller's sneaky, brilliant inventions, the trust. So to get around laws that said one company couldn't own everything, he created a holding company, a separate legal entity that just happened to own all the stock for 34 supposedly independent companies. Sound familiar? It's the exact corporate structure of Alphabet, which owns Google, YouTube, and Waymo, or Meta, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. It's just a monopoly by another name. Eventually, though, the U.S. government started to catch on. The public absolutely hated Rockefeller. They called him a robber baron. And so in 1911, they finally decided to act, which led to the biggest corporate showdown in American history. The Supreme Court brought down the hammer, hard. They ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly, and they ordered it to be completely shattered into 34 smaller, independent companies. It really seemed like the empire was over. Game over.
But this is where the story takes its most incredible twist. The system had one last trick up its sleeve. So the big question is, did breaking up his company actually defeat him?
Not even close. In fact, it made him richer than he could have ever imagined. You see, he still owned a huge chunk of stock in all 34 of the new companies. And it turned out the combined value of all those little companies was way, way more than the value of the one big one. And those 34 baby standards? Well, they grew up to be giants you might recognize, like Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron. He didn't just win, he literally redefined what winning meant. And his final move was maybe his most brilliant of all. He basically invented large-scale philanthropy. By donating hundreds of millions of dollars to create foundations, he pulled off a perfect hat trick. 1. He avoided paying a mountain of taxes. 2. He completely transformed his public image from a villain into a saint. And 3, he used those foundations to fund research and shape policies that, surprise, surprise, just happened to benefit his other companies. It's the exact playbook used by pretty much every billionaire today.
So here we are, living inside this 150-year-old system. What are your real options? Well, you can accept it, enjoy the convenience of Amazon and Google, and just get on with your life. You can try to fight it. Shop local, support small businesses. But let's be honest, that's a really tough uphill battle. Or there's a third choice. You can understand it. If you can't beat the system, you can at least learn its rules. You can see how the game is played and figure out where you fit.
The truth is, you can't really escape the game that John D. Rockefeller designed. It's the water we're all swimming in. But you can learn the rules. And once you see the system for what it really is, well, you can never unsee it. And that knowledge, that awareness, that's your single greatest power.